Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
All right, so we are in the midst of a series in the book of Mark. And so we're just picking key passages from the book of Mark that really show this picture of Jesus as this limitless person. All throughout the gospel, you see Jesus doing absolutely whatever he wants. In a time that we are limited, right? Last year, that's what's been so hard, is that there's all these barriers. There's all these limits to our lives. Like, well, I want to go do this and I want to go do that. And so we're really tested. But you see Jesus come on the scene in his time, and there's absolutely no limits to what he can do. And he reveals who God is, because God's a limitless God. And so we've looked at a limitless kingdom. That Jesus announced the kingdom of God and its invasion. And then last week we looked at limitless life. Like we looked at the parable of the soils, about how the person that prepares their heart and receives the seed of life from Jesus, that actually will produce a harvest of 30 to 60 to 100 other people coming into that harvest as well. And then today what we're going to look at is limitless vision. So when you think of vision, think of like a halftime speech, right? If you've been watching the Final Four, or not the Final Four, but the March Madness with basketball. I'm not a great basketball watcher the rest of the season. There's too many games. I watch all of football, but basketball. But this time with basketball, I'm all in. I'm all in, and our family's done the bracket, and we sit there and compete with that and everything. But when I think of it, I think about like these teams. You've got a team that's showing up really well. And so the halftime speech is different for that coach, maybe even surprising the coach. And then you've got a halftime speech that it's like, man, you guys are doing terrible. You're not even showing up today. Are you awake? And I was thinking about my time as a coach. I coached high school football for 3 seasons. In the last season, we were pretty amazing. We were amazingly horrible. We went 0-9, and so in my mind, every once in a while, I fantasized that we went 1-9. But it was just like it was pretty bad. But the first play of the entire season, I was a defensive coordinator. And so first play of the entire season, I decided that I would blitz my linebacker absolutely away from the play. So it opened up this perfect play. The other team got an 80-yard run, their first play of the season. And so that's how the season started. And but halftime speeches were needed many times during that season. But Jesus, in our passage today, what he does is he actually gives the absolute worst halftime speech according to the thinking of the disciples that you could ever imagine. Because he actually tells them, in their thinking, he tells them that, look, here's what I'm going to do. You've been winning, but now I'm going to lose. That's what they heard. Because you've got to understand, these guys gave up their life to follow Jesus. They gave up everything to follow Jesus. And then now what they're doing is they're walking through this place, this journey with Jesus, and he tells them, look, here's what's going to happen. This is where this is all headed. And it's just totally out of their mindset. It'd be like me, like if I was a captain of a team and saying, hey, we're tied at halftime, but here's what I want to let you know, is that I'm just going to let them score. We've got to let them win. Like that would have been the equivalent of what Jesus told them. And so, in life, there's many pressures that come on us. There's many stories that come at us. If you just look at all the marketing in life, the marketing in life is all about like you getting yours. It's all about you. It's all about you becoming, the biggest and the strongest and the best. And that's all the word. But Jesus shares a different story. Jesus shares something totally different. And one person told me that like they could never be on a jury. It wouldn't be good for them to be on a jury because it wouldn't matter the argument, but it would be whoever spoke last, right? Both are convincing, but whoever speaks last, that's what I'm going for. And that's kind of how it is. Like we get all these messages and then we say, well, that sounds good. That's how I'm going to live my life. And if we feed ourselves a message of self, of building up self just over and over again, it compounds in our lives and we just live for ourselves. And so Jesus knew this about us and he knew it about his disciples. So he takes the disciples on this journey, he takes them away to to a certain place, and we'll see in a minute. But right before the journey, he actually heals a blind man. And this blind man, he comes up to him, and it's a 2-stage healing. And Jesus, he comes up to him, and he actually spits in his eye, right? Jesus would do stuff like that. But, some people think the reason he spat in his eyes was because his eyes were just kind of glazed together, because they were just always closed. Like they were just kind of goopy, and he had to kind of like, wipe that out of there, get that out of there. But so what Jesus does is he does that, and he prays for him, and he opens his eyes, and he says, "What do you see?" He says, "Well, I see people walking around, but they look like trees." And Jesus says, "Okay, let's pray again." And he prays again, and he can see completely. And it's a picture, Mark puts that instance of the things that Jesus did, because it's a picture of you and I. It's a picture of going through this life with one vision, with one halftime speech of how we're supposed to live. But then Jesus comes in and says, "My goal is for you to see perfectly," just like this man. Can you imagine if he said, "You kind of see now. That's cool. That's good. Let's just leave it right there. Let's just leave it, and you can kind of see, and people look like trees, and that's good enough." But that's not good enough. Jesus says, "I want your vision to be perfect because I have something specific for your life." And so that's what Jesus does, is he takes his disciples on this journey, and then he takes us on the journey as well today. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 8, verse 27 through 30. So if you want to turn there in your Bible or your app, that's what we're going to look at. But let's read that together. So starting in verse 27. Hey, Parker, I'm having this. The clicker's not really working, so if you can follow along with me, that'd be great. So Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. So the distance here was about 25 miles. Okay, but it was a large elevation gain. They were I think something like 400 feet below sea level. In Bethsaida, near the Sea of Galilee, and they went all the way up to about 1,100 feet above sea level. So that's a pretty large hike. And so they took 25 miles going up there. By car, it would take you about 2 hours today, making this same trip. And so it was quite a trek. They probably took 2 days walking through this trek. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you are one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter replied, "You are the Messiah." But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So Jesus starts an intentional conversation in this place. He's got them right where he wants them, and he starts an intentional conversation. So as they were walking along, some people think that they would have been right in front of this place within Caesarea Philippi right when he asked them this question. Because Herod wanted to really kiss up to Caesar Augustus. And so he built these temples throughout Israel. And one of the temples was in Caesarea Philippi. And so Caesar Augustus was the Caesar during that time. And so he built this temple, and it would have been a temple basically saying that Caesar was God. Even more specifically, he was the rightful king of Israel. That now that they've taken over, he was the rightful king of Israel. So some people think that they were walking along, Jesus with his disciples, the 13 of them walking, and then all of a sudden they're walking past this temple, and there's lots of hubbub going around and conversations, and maybe even Jesus said, like, "Hey, people are saying that Caesar is God and rightful king. Who do people say that I am?" And so in the midst, they say, well, some people say that you're John. So in other words, John the Baptist or Elijah. There was a prophecy that Elijah would come again, right? And he did. John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah and proclaimed the good news of Jesus. But that was really limiting, right? In the people's minds, like you think, well, wow, miracle workers and reformers of government and life, when you look at that, like, wouldn't that be amazing that Jesus is like one of these, like the heavy hitters of the prophets of time? But it's limiting. And Jesus is saying, well, I'm actually much more than that, but let's see what you know. And then Peter makes this confession. Peter makes the confession that Jesus is the Messiah. So what that would equal is he's saying that you are the true king of Israel. So as they're walking by this one that's claiming to be the king, he's saying, you are the true king of Israel. And that trickles down into every area of the disciples' lives. It wasn't just saying you're the true king of Israel, but it's saying you're the true king of me. Because if you're the true king of Israel, then you're the true king of me. And it's a question we have to ask ourselves today, like who's the true king of you? Like who really, because when you think about a king, like they decide, they're in charge, they're in the driver's seat, they're the ones that you listen to, they're the ones that make the laws, they're the ones that make the rules. Who's the true king of your life? And there's all sorts of kings that can rule on our throne of our lives. We can ultimately be ourselves on the throne of our lives, right? That's the most popular one because we want things how they are. We can have a different Jesus on the throne of our lives, right? We can create a Jesus or a God within our own image. Instead of us being created in his image, we can create a God that's in our image. A God that's a genie that just, if we just rub the lamp, that he just does whatever he wants. A God that is actually added to me instead of me being added to the God. And so these are the things that the people struggle with during that time. And we struggle with today, right? Like, is Jesus just like a superhero? Like he just comes in and saves the world, but he's kind of depersonalized. Like you don't know, like the X-Men. You don't know Captain America or Wonder Woman, or you don't know those people. Like in the stories, if you watch those popular stories today, people watch those. They don't know those people. They're just this figure, and they're just about what they do, right? Like it's not even about knowing them. I mean, some people will try to date them or be around them, that sort of thing. But it's really just about do your thing. Like do what you do. Show up to work, do your thing. That's what we need you to do. And sometimes you'll see in the superhero stories, you'll see a superhero turn bad. And they do something outside of their character. They'll do something bad instead, or they'll just be hanging out and they're like, hey, do what you do. And people are like, well, I don't want you anymore. Like, is Jesus like that? Like he just is supposed to do the things that he does. And if he doesn't do the things that we believe they should be, then I'm done with you. I don't know. But what they're saying, what Peter says, is saying Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the true king. Jesus is the true king of Israel. Jesus is the true king of my life. And so we have to look at this and say, is there a better king? Scripture holds up that Jesus is the king, that we shouldn't be looking for anyone else. We shouldn't be looking for some great thing to relieve the tension in life or to make things right. It's already happened through Jesus. And so guess what God says? Lovingly, deal with it. It is what you think it is. Jesus is the king. Jesus is the one that we're looking for. Jesus is the hope of all the world. It's exactly what we think it is. There's no other place that we have to look besides Jesus. He actually is the one that pulls together the mess of our lives, and he's very good at it. And so there's this fog that happens in life, though. And, when I think of vision, I think of fog sometimes. The first time my brother and I, he was 16, I was 15. The first time we ever drove through thick fog together was, we're from San Diego. And so we went to a Chargers-Raiders game and at Jack Murphy Stadium, which just got torn down. And we were driving after the game and through the fog, and it just all of a sudden, you ever been through that fog and the lights, you're trying to adjust your lights, man, I can't see anything. And you're worried about running into somebody because all of a sudden, we could see maybe like 20 feet in front of us. So we're inching along. We're not experts at this. And then you're worried about somebody coming up behind you and hitting you. And it was just, we inched along for like half an hour. And we had no idea where we were. We just tried to follow the road that was in front of us. We couldn't see, but then all of a sudden everything just cleared. And that's how life is, the demands of life. We have clarity maybe when we're at church. We have clarity maybe when we read the word daily or when we pray. But then all of a sudden stuff comes at us. Some days are like a conveyor belt where it's just thing after thing comes after us. And then we get lost. We get lost in the fog, but then clarity comes. And that's what Jesus is doing. He's saying, look, I want you to have complete clarity complete clarity about what life is about who the true king is. And so he brings them to this place, Caesarea Philippi. He brings them to this place. And I think globally, one thing that God's doing in the world now is that we've kind of been in that place over the last year. We've kind of been in this place of like an intentional place. And not that God caused the pandemic or anything like that, but as you've seen thing after thing taken away. Thing after thing that we enjoy or trust in or that we want is taken away. And, you've seen, the things that we do to each other. We think that we're advanced society, and yet look how we treat each other still. And now it's actually on video for everybody to see the things that we do to one another, right? And then you look at governments. You look at government officials and the way people have been operating and manipulating and doing different things. And I mean, you just look all around and you look at yourself and say, what can I trust in? What really stands? I mean, sports even stopped, right? I mean, like the NCAA tournament that I talked about, there wasn't one last year. The rhythm of life got totally thrown out. And then the only thing that really lasted, that kept operating the way that they operate, is God. Jesus Christ is the only one that kept operating throughout the whole pandemic. It's the only thing that kept going the way that he does is Jesus. And so we've been in this place, and I don't know if you're there yet. I don't know if I'm there yet. I'm still battling. I'm still coming through the fog of saying, wow, Lord, you really are the only thing that lasts and true. And so the next thing we see this mission of Jesus in verse 31. And we see, it says, then Jesus began to tell them, you got to switch to the next one, thanks, that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders. So now that Peter declared that Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus shares with them, hey, let me tell you what that means, because they had all these ideas of what this Messiah was. And be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but three days later, he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with the disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. So Jesus, right, he makes sure all the other disciples are looking, and then he reprimands Peter. Get away from me, Satan, he said. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's. And that's the center of what we've got to get today about vision. Is we have to move from seeing things from a human point of view to seeing things from God's point of view. And somehow God's point of view involves this suffering, this laying down of life. It's different than everything that we're fed throughout this life about like getting me, more and more of me, that I would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. John, one of the first followers of Jesus, he said, I must decrease and he must increase. Speaking of Jesus. That like Jesus should get more and more, and I, myself, should get less and less. And so in this verses we just read, Jesus lays out, notice that in verse 31, he says, must suffer. That the Son of Man must suffer. Well, why must the Son of Man suffer? Like, why did God have to do it that way? Well, it's his chosen way, and his ways are different, right? I mean, what any of us would take our child and have them sacrificed and experience real pain and rejection? I mean, who of us would choose that? And yet we know that in John 3:16 it says, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish, but would have everlasting life. And so there's the reason. So the Son of Man must suffer because of the sin of the world and because of the love of God. Those two things. That's why Jesus had to suffer. The sin of people, including you and I, and then the love of God. They meet at the cross. They meet at the life laid down of Jesus. That would have been a huge shock to everybody. Like, wait a minute, the Messiah is going to come and suffer? I mean, even the best interpretive writings of the Old Testament up to this point, when it spoke of the Messiah, you'd look at scripture like Isaiah 53, and it would speak of the suffering Messiah. We look back and say, clearly, this is the suffering Messiah. We look at it like this is Jesus, like beaten and bruised for our transgressions, and pierced. I mean, this is Jesus. This is what happened. But the best interpreters of the time, what they would do is scriptures like that, they would say that they would, even when they're suffering, they would say that this is actually speaking of the people suffering, but the Messiah is victorious. So they would parse this language all throughout these scriptures that we look at and say, that's the suffering Messiah. They would say, no, that's the people. And then this part's the Messiah. The Messiah never suffers. They just saw the Messiah as victorious. And so, and it's a struggle today for Jews as they consider Jesus. They consider, it's like, no way that Jesus is the Messiah, because there's no way that the Messiah would be defeated. But Jesus says that's human thinking. That's not God's thinking. And so it's this changing of thought. Now, Matthew's gospel, what Matthew does, he kind of breaks this scene down for us more. He actually shares with us that Jesus encouraged Peter after his confession. So Peter says, you are the Messiah. You are the hoped for one. You are the anointed one. You are the true King of Israel, the mighty one that can do anything, the limitless one. And then Jesus says to him, Matthew tells us in Matthew 16, he says, blessed are you, Simon blessed are you. And he says to him, he says, because you have been shown this by my Father. So he encourages him. And then he says to him, he talks to him about like how he's going to build his church based upon that confession and based upon the faith of Peter and like that kind of faith, he's going to build his church. And he just really encourages him. And I think what happens is Peter kind of gets puffed up a little bit. He's like, oh man, all right, I've arrived. I'm the one. I knew I was the best disciple. I said it first, I said it best, and I alone hear from God. I'm the one that hears from God, and everybody else is kind of suspect. I'm going to fill it in. Because what do you see? You see him rebuke Jesus. All of a sudden, Peter thinks that he hears God better than Jesus. And so Peter is a perfect example of how you have a sincere heart of a person, because Peter was sincere. He didn't have a bad heart. He had a sincere heart coupled with man's thinking. And you see this all throughout life. You see this in government. You see this in businesses. You see this in relationships. You see it in churches quite a bit. I've seen it quite a bit where you have sincere people that take man's thinking and they apply it to the church. They apply it to the kingdom of God. And they're very sincere, but the reality is that the only way that you get to know the ways of God is by doing what Jesus says you do, which is by obeying in self-denial and suffering. That's the only way. And so when you take man's ways and you apply it into the church, it's always chaos. It's always chaos. Man's ways are like what Samuel spoke of when he went to look for the king of Israel, right? He says, Samuel, go down to this place and see Jesse. He has a son that's going to be king. And so what happens? Well, he says, he sees the oldest one. Oh, it must be this one. He's got the look and he's the good looking guy and he's talented and all these things. And he says, it must be this one. And no, and he goes through all the sons. He goes through each one. And then what happens is he says, don't you have any more? Because God's like, nope, I've rejected him. I've rejected him. And then finally what happens? He says, do you have any more? He says, well, I do have my youngest son. He's out in the field tending the sheep. He says, bring him. And so they waited and they waited. And what God spoke to Samuel is he said, look, man looks at the outward appearance. Like all the stuff that we spend time on, right? Like all this time, all the stuff that we spend dressing up, all this outward look, all this outward stuff, all this outward thing. What man looks at that. That's man's ways. But God says, but I look at the heart. I look at what's on the inside. Because guess what? When you're squeezed, what comes out of you? What's on the inside, just like a jelly donut, right? And that's how we are in life. And so whether in the church or whether in business or in a marriage or life or those things. I mean, that's right. Like maybe some of you are like, maybe you're looking for spouses, or you're looking for people in your relationships, or you're making decisions about things, or you're hiring employees, or maybe you're making a business deal, or you're trying to have wisdom about what's really going on, or all sorts of things. Don't be fooled by the outward appearance of things. Look at the internal of people. That's what's most important. What's most important is what's on the inside, right? But we, as you look at a spouse, like the Bible even says, like, hey, look, beauty, and you can take the same thing for guys, right? Beauty or being handsome is fading. The outward is fading, but what's on the inside is what lasts. That's the true thing that lasts. And so Jesus is dialing in all of this with people, and he's saying to them, look, in the second half, we're going to lose. And I'm going to do it intentionally. This must happen. I've got to lose. I've got to go to this place. I've got to lay down my life. And somehow this losing was God's way. See, Jesus believed that evil and sin and death in all the things that are so horrible in this life, Jesus believed that by laying down his life, that he would actually overcome all of that it would actually be set right, that all the things that are wrong in the world, that Jesus, by him dying, that those would be set right in life. And you look at it and you say, well, wait a minute. Jesus died, but I still see all that stuff. Au contraire. Where are things headed? God is much more concerned about where things are headed than how things appear currently. See, the things that God has done, he's declared, and he's bringing them to a certain end, to a certain place. He's traveling along with us in this life. We would think, well, God, if I was God, I would just put a quick stop to things. Like my sons are learning to drive right now. And if you've ever taught somebody how to drive, when they first get on, the gas and the brake is like, woo, woo. It's just like that. Actually, one of my sons, I won't tell you which one day out here, we went and got the mail at the entrance to the property here. And he said, hey, Dad, can I just drive the car up in there? Sure, let's do it. And so, they're driving like this. And I say, okay, do this. They're following directions. I'm like, this is beautiful. This is great. And so first thing they do, I said, now put it into gear. Okay, you've got your foot on the brake. And I said, so slowly put your foot on the pedal. So what they do is they look down, press on the gas, and we're going like 0 to 60 off the cliff over there. Because I'm like, no, you have to look, because they're looking at the pedals, and I said, press the brake. And so they go, look again. And so it was just bad. And so that's how it can end up being. But let's look at verse 34. We see this end here because, this is what's really going on. Because you think that maybe Jesus didn't know what he was doing, or maybe God didn't really put the full approach on things. But you see, the work that Jesus did on the cross now works itself out in the lives of people. Because not only is Jesus telling his team, look, I'm going to go lose, but I want you to come lose with me. I want you to come think like I do as well and live your life like me. So verse 34, it says, then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, if any of you wants to be my follower. And so Jesus, he's calling in more. He's going fishing, right? And he's like, hey, if you guys are looking in, probably at this place you had, remember the temple of Caesar Augustus, and they're looking in and like, wow, I'd love to be Jesus' disciple. I'd really love to be like, one of those guys. Look at those guys. They have it all together. And, and some people look at like, some people pastors that have had really big impact, on the world and have reached many people, thousands and thousands of people. John Wimber, founder of the Vineyard Association of Churches, I remember I heard him say this. He said, people tell me they want my ministry. Like they want what I have. And he says, no, you don't. Like you don't know what it costs. You don't know what it costs to have that. And so that's what we look here is, he says, if anyone wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. So self-denial, so denying yourself. Take up your cross and follow me. Jesus is equating denying yourself to taking up your cross. Okay? It's not literally saying I've got to carry a cross around. I've got to carry this cross around it's like, no, the cross is denying yourself. And he says it, he calls it selfish ways. So if you try to hang on to your life in verse 35, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. Now, this is really aggressive language, isn't it? Like we should feel this, like it's giving up your life or hanging on to your life. And he says the opposite. I mean, it's the opposite of everything we said. Like Nikki prayed earlier, like she said, like the things we're holding on to tightly, if we can let go. But it's like when something's really important to you, what do? Like you hold on tight. Like my boys are all big now, but when they were little, I'll tell you what, when we were on traffic or at an amusement park or whatever, man, I've got that little hand. I'm just squeezing it. And sometimes they say, Dad, you're holding on too tight. It's like, well, you're really important. So I'm not going to let go. And so what I'd do is I'd grab their wrist instead, right? Because their fingers are squished. Like, I'm not letting go of you. But that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying like, hey, the things that you're holding on really tight to, I want you to let go. Like your design on your life, like how you want it, your way of thinking, I want you to let that go. And if you do that, you'll gain your life. And you say to yourself, well, that doesn't make sense. But it doesn't make sense because that's how the world tells us to think. Like, I've just got to get mine. I've just got to get mine. I've just got to get mine. But what's interesting is it doesn't even really work that way if we really think about it, right? Like the most successful people, like the most successful athletes, sure, there's some that are all about themselves. But the most successful ones are people like I heard something about Peyton Manning, one of the best quarterbacks, Hall of Fame, all that stuff, Super Bowl champions, all those things. And I remember hearing something about him is that, he would, like, if somebody would do a good play, like in these games, he's a competitor. But he'd say, hey, great job. Good. Somebody would snap, hey, good job, right? He was one that was about others. And that's so different. It doesn't really work that way. And then you look at things like if you run a business, like, does it really work if people know that you're like just all about you? I'm just going to get mine. It may work for a bit. But one of my mentors says, he's Irish. He says, if you hand it out in slices, you'll get it back in loaves. Like if you really focus on others, if you really make life about others, if you really make life about someone else instead of about you, you actually get that. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, hey, if you make it about others, because that's how you deny yourself. That's how you carry your cross, because this is probably hard for you tangibly to say, well, how do I do this? How do I actually do this? It's about others. And then in verse 36, he dials in more. He says, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? And this one ultimately, yes, it is speaking about like, look, I have a living body, a living life right now, but I'm headed to a place. Like, where am I headed for eternity? Am I headed to be with God, or am I heading to separation from God? It's speaking of soul of that, absolutely. Like if I just set out to have everything I can have in this life, but I don't ever become, like if I don't ever have a relationship with God, it's just all about me, like he's never the king, then yeah, I'll be separated from him. Because eternity is the continuation of this life. And so if I want nothing to do with God in this life or Jesus in this life, then I'll have nothing to do with him in eternity. But if I give my life to him and surrender my life to him in this life, then I'll be with him in eternity. But then practically, what does this look like now? Because I think it's even more tangible now, because again, what you do now echoes through eternity. What is it saying? And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? It's saying, what do you benefit if you just become this big puffed up person and you get everything and you're in charge and your armor is just strong and nobody can touch you and you're always in charge and you're never vulnerable and you've got what you want and nobody can mess with you and you're just completely in charge and control and you've got everything. What you actually lose is this. It's a facade. Even though you've gained everything you ever wanted in this world, you never became who you're supposed to be. That's what it means when it says soul. Because your soul is the real you. What does it profit you if you get everything that your flesh wants, but you never become the person that God intended you to be? It profits you nothing. And again, this is aggressive language, but think about it. Like, this is the time of planting seeds, right? Isn't it? You plant in spring, right? Planting seeds. Like out here, they're going to plant, I think they had corn last year, so probably soybeans this year. And that soybean, do they use a seed for soybean? Yeah. Okay, let's say yes. I'm in over my head as a farmer here. But if you plant a seed, are you hurting the seed? No. You put it in the ground and you're putting it into a place that it can become what it was meant to be. And so when Jesus says, come along and lose with me, come along and die with me, come along and take up your cross with me, the life that you get from that is you become the person you were meant to be. In verse 37, it says, verse 38, if anyone is ashamed of me in my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So the opposite of being ashamed of Jesus is being enthusiastically pursuing Jesus. So people will read this verse and they focus on the, ashamed of me. Well, don't focus on the wrong behavior. Focus on the right behavior. What is the right behavior? Is enthusiastically following after Jesus. That's what he's calling people to. Enthusiastically following after him. You see, you can't follow Jesus, especially when he says, like, I'm calling you to come and die, to give up your life, to live for others. You can't follow Jesus back on your heels. If you're back on your heels following Jesus, it won't work. The only way to follow Jesus is by leaning into him, seeking after him, giving up everything for him. There is no other Christianity besides this. We all take different off-ramps. I have as well, where I may pull back for a while and it's about me, or I do different things differently. But then I always come back to this is the only real Christianity, which is Jesus says, come and die. Come and die that you may live. You see, whatever's happened to Jesus happens to us. And so when you pray to receive Christ, when you give up your life for him, when you seek after him, when you receive the forgiveness of your sins, it's not just this like, well, isn't that nice? Jesus is like, all right, I've got you right where I want you. I've got you in this place. And so if you wonder what Jesus is doing with you, he is identifying you with him, which is your flesh and your life and the way you want to do things. He's crucifying that. He's killing that. He's laying it down. And you say, well, gosh, that's kind of morbid and that's kind of, absolutely. But you become the person you're made to be. It reminds me of when I moved here, we had an animal, like a skunk, underneath like this little porch area. And so I'm like, what do I do with it? And so one person said to me, here's a skunk trap. I'm like, I didn't even know there was such a thing. And so, so they just, it was this whole thing. And they said, well, once you get in there, you kill it. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I just want to get rid of it. Can't I just drive it somewhere and do it? Well, he'll just return. Well, no, he won't. Like, if I talk to him, he'll stay away. Say, look, this isn't a good place for you because, people are actually gunning for your life. They're telling me I should let you go. But you guys, that's how we deal with this life. We're just like me with that skunk. Luckily he left on his own. Well, actually, I covered in the porch, and so he may still be in there. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure he's gone. But is that like that with you? Are you carrying around still just kind of like, no, I don't want it to die. I want to stay in control. The path to life is by surrender. So surrender today. Be the seed planted in the ground and let it spring up. And the trick is that life of you becoming who you're made to be is so much better than you're thinking. It's so much better. In the how of this, right? Because you say, well, how do I do that? It's, again, I'm going to deny myself, which means that I put others first. It means that I walk it out. It means that I obey Jesus. That's how I show my love for him, is by obeying what he calls me to do. And it's really simple. You start your day and you say, Jesus, I receive your love today. Show me what to do. Show me what you're doing. And he speaks to you through his word. He speaks to you through prayer. And then he shows things to you. He'll show people to you. And he'll say, hey, go serve that person, or go say hi to that person, or go help that person, or hey, I want you to give $200 to this person over here. They lost their job and they need help. They need help, paying their bills. Well, Lord, that's my $200. No, that's my $200. I loaned it to you. You do those kind of things where it hurts. And I just want to put that, it's just like anything else in life. Physically, like my boys, like they work out so hard and they're getting all these gains. I go work out with them. I'm not getting as many gains. You know why? Because I'm kind of like, yeah, you guys work hard. I'm over here, right? It's like, got the thing on. It's like, what resistance are you on? Resistance? Okay. It's like, why are you using the 2-pound weights? Because it feels okay, right? Like, I don't want to hurt. But you guys, when you sacrifice, when you hurt with Jesus, again, there's no other Christianity. That is where you grow.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.